Hello and welcome back to this course, covering the exam topics for the JNCIS ENT certification. In this section of the course, we're reviewing protocol-independent routing, where we will review Junos routing features independent of dynamic protocols. In this lesson, we'll be reviewing Martians. No, not little green men or space pirates. We'll be taking a look at Martian addresses. These address ranges are invalid routes, which are generally reserved for special uses in an RFC publication and observed by most network device vendors. So let's review what the default Martian addresses and what a device will do with them, and how to edit the default list of Martian routes. First, a Martian route is simply a term used to describe a non-routable address space for the local device. These are routes which will be ignored by the local routing device, even if another router attempts to advertise the route by some dynamic protocol. The classification of Martian addresses was first mentioned in RFC 1208. The need for this classification arose to handle packets which arrive erroneously or are destined for obviously incorrect address space, like those which are reserved. In Junos, several address spaces are configured as Martians by default. These are shown in this table. Each of these are reserved address spaces and are all defined in RFC 3330 if you're interested to get more information. The 0000/8 space is used to refer to hosts on the local network in certain circumstances. The 127.000/8 range is reserved as a loopback range, where traffic sent from an upper-level protocol to a destination address in this range should internally loop back to the originating host. The 192.0.0.0/24 space was originally reserved by IANA, though the original base for reservation is no longer valid, and the space may eventually be allocated by a regional registry in the future. The 240.0.0.0/4 space is simply reserved, with the exception of the broadcast address 255.255.255.255. Although we've mostly discussed IPv4 Martian addresses, IPv6 Martian address spaces also exist and are shown in the table here. So now that we know what a Martian address is, and the default IPv4 and IPv6 Martian address ranges, let's see how we can add or remove Martian addresses from the Junos configuration. As we mentioned in the last slide, Martian addresses are primarily defined as addresses in Junos which will be ignored in the routing information base and not appear in the routing table. That said, you may have a use case in your environment where you want to ensure a certain address space is always ignored, as it's reserved for some special use in your network. Otherwise, though, you largely should not go changing the default Martian address list in Junos, as they're reserved and non-routable for a reason. Martian addresses are configured in the Edit Routing Options Martians configuration hierarchy. We see here when we specify a new Martian route that we have several configuration options to define further what range of prefixes should be considered a Martian route and therefore ignored by the routing information base. In the configuration snippet below, we see some examples of what these Martian route configurations look like. Finally, let's briefly review how to show the configured Martian routes. We use the Show Route Martians command to display all configured Martian routes in Junos. Here, we see the familiar default Martian routes, and even the default route. The default route is a Martian route, though is explicitly allowed. Additionally, we see at the bottom the routes which were configured in the previous slide, each showing to be disallowed and therefore will be ignored by the routing information base and never appear in the routing table or be advertised to any neighboring routers. I appreciate you sticking around to review the purpose, configuration, and monitoring of Martian routes with me. I hope that this lesson has been informative for you, and I would like to thank you for viewing.